Apollo 15 was a mission with a main focus on geology. For Commander Scott, it was the third spaceflight after Gemini 8 and Apollo 9. The landing area was the Hadley Rim in the Apennine Mountains of the Moon, one of the highest lunar ranges. On July 30th, 1971, the lunar module Falcon headed towards the curve of the Hadley Rim, the so-called elbow. In spite of the mountainous terrain, the lunar module lands safely on the Moon's surface. The astronauts gazed down into the 370-meter-deep Hadley Gorge. Extinct lava flows and collapsed lava veins formed a fantastic landscape. The panorama photo shows the overwhelming Hadley Massif, which is 4.6 kilometers high and 25 kilometers wide. The astronauts were able to use the lunar rover for the first time. In spite of the defective front steering, the vehicle, which could travel at up to 12 kilometers per hour, proved ideal for lunar exploration across greater distances. Thanks to the lunar vehicle and improved spacesuits, the astronauts were able to spend a total of over 18 hours outside the lunar module and collect some 77 kilograms of lunar rock. Among the astronauts' tasks was also the franking of stamps in the vacuum of the Moon. This marked the start of the stamp affair of Apollo 15. In addition to the approved envelopes, the astronauts also took envelopes that had not been approved with them on board, which they then sold to a German collector for a considerable sum of money. When NASA learned later what had happened, a formal investigation against the Apollo 15 crew was initiated. NASA reprimanded the astronauts, and this marked the end of the active space careers of Scott, Worden, and Irwin.
First day of issue. What could be a better place to cancel the stamp than right here, the Hadley Rim?
After franking the stamps, Commander Scott aimed to prove before a live camera that the law of falling bodies also applied on the Moon. He proposed dropping a hammer and a feather at the same time. Despite their different weights, both objects should hit the ground at the same time because there was no air resistance in the vacuum prevailing on the Moon. Would Galileo Galilei's law of falling bodies be equally valid on the Moon?
Well, in my left hand I have a feather. In my right hand, a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the Moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. And the feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two of them here and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
In honor of the astronauts and cosmonauts who had died during the exploration of space, Scott placed a statuette, the fallen astronaut, on the Moon's surface. The names of the members of the Apollo 1 crew were also listed on the aluminum plaque. On a cold January day in 1967, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee had been on their way to a routine exercise. It was known as a plugs-out test and involved the cutting off of all connections between the rocket and the spacecraft and the service center. The test was considered quite safe. Neither the fire brigade nor the tower team for the capsule were in attendance. As he climbed into the capsule, Grissom noticed an unpleasant smell of sour milk. The radio contact kept cutting out. Then, a fire broke out, fed by the pure oxygen in the command capsule. The exit hatch could not be opened because the pressure inside was too high. 30 seconds after the fire broke out, the astronauts had suffocated. Their bodies became fused with the nylon suits and seats. The accident was a grave setback for the Apollo program, which was still in its infancy. Numerous changes were made to the Apollo modules and the spacesuits. The exit hatch could be opened in an emergency even when the pressure inside was much higher. The cables and insulation materials were made fireproof. The atmosphere on board was replaced by an oxygen-nitrogen mixture in the starting phase. It was not until over 1.5 years later that the first manned Apollo spaceflight would take place, Apollo 7. Before returning to Earth, Apollo 15 released a sub-satellite to measure the gravity and magnetic fields. The sub-satellite discovered a magnetism anomaly around the Reiner Gamma region. The magnetic field is strong enough to deflect the solar wind. There was a moment of anxiety during splashdown. One of the braking parachutes failed to open. 2 parachutes were just adequate to ensure a safe landing. The goals of Apollo 16 were the lunar highlands and the rocky material thought to be there from the earliest days of the moon's existence. While the lunar module Orion is located on the backside of the moon, the main propulsion unit of the Apollo spacecraft was to be ignited. But the reserve system gave rise to uncontrollable vibrations. According to the rules of the mission, the pilot of the command module, Thomas Mattingly, did not carry out the ignition. The spacecraft was thus unable to swing into an orbit around the moon. Together, the flight controllers at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Texas, the mathematicians at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the engineers at North American Rockwell in South California were able to isolate the problem. This was followed by simulations that soon paid off. As soon as the main propulsion unit was switched on, the vibrations of the reserve propulsion unit were no longer dangerous. Commander John Young and lunar module pilot Charles Duke landed in the Descartes Highlands just 6 hours behind schedule.
That's a pretty outstanding picture here, I tell you. Come on a little bit closer. Okay, here we go, a big one. Off the ground, the floor. There we go. Dead. I'd like to see an Air Force salute, Charlie, but I don't think they salute the Air Force. Sure we do. And fly high and straight, land soft. Okay, Charlie, say when. Here we go. Good again. One for you. Okay, wait a minute, one more. This looks like a good time for some good news here. The House passed a space budget yesterday, 277 to 60, which includes a vote for the shuttle. Wonderful. Tony, again, I'll say it, but that salute, proud to be an American. I'll tell you, what a program, and what a place, what an experience. Yeah, and I'll say it too. Oh my goodness, needs that shuttle mighty bad.
NASA used a spectrograph for the distant ultraviolet light. The camera had to be kept cool and was therefore positioned in the shadow of the lunar module. The astronauts aimed at the astronomical targets by hand.
Okay.
Thus, the camera showed the Earth's geocorona, which is made of hydrogen and which extends across up to 15.5 times the Earth's radius. Multiple lighting makes the Earth's polar lights, its sunlit atmosphere, and the stars in the background clearly visible. The moon travelers undertake a number of excursions. They travel a total of over 26 kilometers with the lunar rover. The intensive geological training on the Earth pays off on the moon. Over 96 kilograms of rock and soil samples are carried back to Earth.
Where you going back in, John? Charlie, your entrance is open and the rock might come out. Okay. Real friable, isn't it? Now you found a real rock. Aha! Look at that teeth kill. Let me get it, John. Like it's a very friable rock, and it's the most sharp rock I've ever seen. It's just pure white. Ah! Good show. Well, okay. We see that one went all the way in. Not quite.
The Heathrow experiment is designed to measure tectonic and volcanic activity on the moon. An unfortunate error by Commander Young makes this the biggest disappointment on the Apollo 16 mission.